What cities have the best salary to cost of living ratio for SWEs? I was wondering what cities US preferably provide a happy medium between salary and cost of living. I am currently a sophomore in university and am thinking of relocating once I graduate. I am based in NYC and have lived here all my life, but it is becoming increasingly expensive. I understand that salaries in NYC are higher to compensate for this discrepancy, but it still feels like a struggle unless you're making around six figures. I want to live by myself. I don't know how realistic this sounds for a new grad, but even then a good portion of my salary would go to rent. I wouldn't mind a location with a lower salary if it meant that I could ultimately save more and have a higher quality of life. What are some potential cities I should be looking at? What do salaries and cost of living look like in your area? I did a project on this for an urban econ class in college this past semester, but specifically for E's, but holds pretty constant for SWEs as well, as I have data for that as well. The objective best regions by average home price versus median 25th percentile and 10th percentile. Salary MS and BS new grads respectively basically are Cleveland, OKC, Buffalo, St. Louis, and Detroit. Got all my data from NAR, National Association of Realtors, and BLS, Bureau of Labor Stats, and did all the math for it for the class. PM me if anybody wants to see it all mapped out. Find jobs first then move. Just because you move to a super HCOL area doesn't mean you will automatically make a higher salary. Especially in this market. There's a reason people work in VHCOL for 15-20 years then move to the burbs or to a smaller town. To put this in perspective, if you make $200K a year and your expenses are $80K, you are bringing home $120K annually. If you make $100K and your expenses are $40K, your gross is $60K. Even at $150K with half the expenses of NYC, you're only bringing in $110K. Generally, I think right now the best balance of job availability comp is probably Seattle. Maybe Austin, but not sure about how the increase of growth has affected the rental market. Chicago is by far the best if you can get into the trading firms that congregate there. If you're not sure what a new grad can make, check out But I Can Tell You That a FAANG in an area like NY Seattle SF will offer a new grad hire a salary around $130,000 plus a sign-on bonus in the $50,000 range, plus relocation stipend. The trick is that it's very, very tough to get one of those offers right now unless you also intern at that company. Internships are the most reliable path to a full-time hire there. I think that it depends on what phase in your life that you're in. If you're in your early 20s in NYC, get a roommate and grind till you get a high-tier FAANG-like job and you'll save a ton of money. OTOH if you have a family and need to deal with schools, nannies, owning a place. I don't necessarily think it'll be a good fit. Chicago. Get paid HCOL in MCOL and live like a king. $250K remote here. You need to work somewhere that helps you grow the most right now. Ignore the expenses. Have a roommate for a little while and work at an SFNYC etc. tech company. You can move to MCOL or LCOL later. The best ratios are finding a company that doesn't adjust salaries based on location and work remotely. I have friends who work remote raking in FAANG salaries while living in the middle of nowhere. Beyond that, I'd expect the mid-high cost of living tech hubs to be it. Like Not NYC or SF. But things like Austin or Atlanta probably have pretty decent ratios. Did a lot of research on this, though it was 2-3 years ago. Seattle wins based on data from Glassdoor, Blind, etc. Call is less than Bay Area. Salaries are less but not by much. And lack of state income tax. Work remote while living in low cost of living. In my experiences, they will pay you less based on location. But it's still proportionally much more than you would get working at a local company. I say Seattle. But live somewhere where you take a ferry into work 1-2 days a week. Anything across the water is like 1-2 price and super cheap cost of living. Also nothing to do. I work remote, and if I wanted to live an isolated life, I could buy a house on the water that costs 1 year of my salary. Just have to be back for the 8 p.m. ferry if I wanted to make it home lol. Chicago is pretty decent balance of call and opportunity. But it isn't a tech hub. Lots of other types of opportunities, but not really a FAANG track place. When I moved to NYC from a Midwestern town, my salary more than doubled. Sure, expenses increased, but not enough to wipe out the difference. I'm saving at a rate that wouldn't even have been possible in my previous location. And also I don't have to live in the Midwest. So that's a plus. Among tech hubs, it's Seattle. Huge tech presence with FAANG. Unicorns. Startups. No state income tax. HCOL, but not as high as SF and NYC. I am biased. I think Minneapolis is good for IT career. Cost of living is not high and you can save enough money for whatever reasons. People don't come to Minnesota due to bad winter, but that gives benefits for whoever wants to come here. Raleigh, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Sioux. What about Raleigh and Charlotte? Solid salaries and still cheap compared to NYC and SF. If you are purely trying to understand where to live to get ahead financially, one is still best off living in a small apartment in a VHCOL city is still probably advantageous. But to answer your question, Pittsburgh, Austin, Twin Cities, Atlanta. Work remotely, live somewhere cheap. Detroit, if you can get Amazon there. Seattle is the best. I lived state tax and 1BR still under $2,000 a month if you aren't too picky. Sales tax is higher, but I didn't feel the pinch at all. Philadelphia suburbs is good. The pay is medium or high and the call is low. Try the Smart Asset tool for a ballpark comparison. Have you made a decision about where you want to retire yet? I'd recommend starting in a HCOL first if you can make it there. Great, otherwise you can move. It's much harder going in the other direction. Last I looked into this, I think it was Houston. Although my dive into it heavily favored places where there were a lot of job offerings, I quickly realized that answer was places no one wants to live that are doing well economically. NYC. Work in Manhattan and pick an affordable spot with a decent commute in Queens or maybe NJ. Michigan is great if you can get a remote job at a good tech company. $300K for seniors goes a long way here. Probably DC suburbs. Chicago easily wins here. At a point I turned down a $80 an hour contract. My rent was less than $1,400 on the biggest one-bedroom I've ever seen. Great public transportation means you don't need a car. Bay Area probably.